Welcome everyone to sixth grade back to school nights. I am Joanna Thompson, and we are going to introduce all the advisors right now. So if we can do one slide back, the other direction. And I'm Joanna Thompson, and I will pass it off to Bridget.
Hi, I'm Bridget Porterfield. Hello.
I'm Rachel Jury.
Go ahead, Valentina.
Meet the advisors.
Hi, good evening. I'm Julia Berger. I teach.
Can this thing started?
It's okay. Go ahead. Hi, good evening. I'm Julia Berger. I teach Hebrew and Jewish Studies sixth grade. Welcome to our Gibush.
Hi everyone, I was here not too long ago last year talking to you all. Josh Mather once again. We moved to sixth grade this year.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Horowitz, and I also teach sixth grade Hebrew and Jewish Studies. So excited to be here with you tonight.
And we're going to move right into talking about what it's like in Gibush. The next slide shows our schedule for the evening. You'll see that we are going to run through what happens in the mornings and then each of the content areas, and we'll have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. So if you have a question while we are talking, please put it in the chat or write it down on a piece of paper, and someone will be monitoring that chat, and at the end we'll be able to kind of group all the questions together and get them all answered, hopefully in time. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Jury, who is going to talk about what happens in the mornings. Ms. Jury and Ms. Porterfield.
Hi. So yeah, we meet every morning in our advisory and Gibush groups together to kind of start our day as a community. We come together to have that.
Right, I'll turn off my video.
Check in with each other. So for example, today we started with greeting each other across the room because we're working on projecting our voices with our masks on. And then we went into talking about what we did yesterday. And then we worked on our norms, and norms are our essential agreements that help us come together as a community and respect each other. And so we finished those today, which is outstanding. And then we moved into a game, and that's kind of a preview of like what we do every morning in order to start the kids off with a great feeling. Here's Rachel.
Awesome. And you're all familiar because you've been in middle school already for a year with the role of an advisor, but that person continues with your child and with you through middle school. So just a couple reminders. They are like the cheerleader, the communication person, and all around helper at school for your specific child. So if you're emailing a math teacher or a different subject area, make sure you CC the advisor on those emails, just so we can keep a pulse as your child moves into sixth grade.
Julie, you're muted.
Jewish life. Every day we learn Jewish studies in sixth grade. So we integrate Jewish holidays as a community in our Gibush. Like example, in Chag Sukkot, we will eat all breakfast or lunch in the sukkah, and we make sure this year to keep the social distance. We also connecting Jewish literature and values to general studies. Like example, when we will learn about Bnei Israel in Egypt, about slavery, so we connect the civil rights movement. So, and other advisory areas. So Jewish studies absolutely in Gibush time also.
All right, I'm here to talk about executive functioning once again. It seems like not long ago we were in Blum talking about the exact same topic. This year is a little different, as you might have heard many, many times. One thing that's really interesting for kids that have some challenges with materials, they might not have as many challenges this year because they're in the same room most of the time. So managing materials this year is going to be easier for those students who have a harder time. We're going to continue doing our rush uh, binder system and making that color coordinated system that's really important for those students. But also we're going to be moving that even more this year into our technology fluency, and getting kids really comfortable with technology. If we have to go on to distance learning again this year, distance learning is going to look exactly the same in terms of their materials as it will when they're in person. So they'll have the main thing we're using this year is Google Classroom and the whole Google Suite system of apps, and that's where we're trying to get those students nice and fluent with those. And it should be pretty seamless in between if we have to go to distance learning or if we're in person. All of the turning in of assignments and collecting of materials is all happening through that Google Classroom, so it should be pretty easy. We also work in 6th grade about long-term planning and task analysis. So we work on breaking down assignments into smaller chunks and smaller tasks in order to help them meet small goals so that they have a more efficient way to kind of plan for those longer assignments. Self-advocacy is huge in 6th grade, learning how to write a really good email, learning how to know who they are as learners and present that to the teachers and ask for help. Those are big things that we do in 6th grade. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Sarescu and Mr. Horowitz for social emotional learning. Mr. Escu, you are muted currently.
I'm sorry. Again, this is Mrs. Orescu. Social and emotional learning is extremely important for our students because it supports them in growing as the individuals that will be successful at middle school, high school, as well as beyond. We would like them to learn how to manage their emotions, to be able to maintain, healthy relationships, be able to learn how to navigate difficult situations, problem solve, as well as, learn how to make, important decisions in their life. So I think social emotional learning is extremely important. It's probably more important than learning how to read and how to do math. Thank you. I'm going to now pass the mic to Mr. Horowitz.
Hi, everyone. One of the main things that we focus on in social emotional learning is how we express our ideas, both verbally and non-verbally. And this year, we are especially focusing on our nonverbal communication skills because, as you can see, we for most of the day are wearing masks. So communicating with more than just our mouths, but how our eyes communicate how we're feeling, how our tone of voice communicates how we're feeling. We focus a lot on that and how those skills can really enrich our relationships. And at the base of all of that is dignity. One of the big things that we focus on in our social emotional learning is treating not only ourselves with dignity, but each other. And as we help our students navigate through their sticky situations that may come up, we really focus on maintaining the dignity of the individual and of each other. Next, I'm going to pass it on to Ms. Thompson for human growth and development.
Hey everyone. So human growth and development in 6th grade is taught in Guy-Bouche, which is why it's in this part of the presentation. But we haven't forgot that these 6th graders missed their sexual health curriculum in science last year because we all went home to distance learning. So I've been working with Ms. Macbeth, and we will be doing their 5th grade curriculum this year in 6th grade science. So never fear. At Bernard Zell, we focus on the biological aspects of sexual health in 5th grade from a scientific perspective, but in 6th grade, we take it from a relationship perspective. We focus on friendships similar to how we do in our social emotional work, but we also think about what does it mean to have more than friendships? And what do we do with all those feelings? And how are the hormones that are happening in our body playing a part in that? How are they playing a part in why our bodies are changing, but how are they playing a part in how we're feeling and how it's making us act? So we also use this time to really answer questions that kids have, and they're allowed to put questions in a question box, and we get crazy questions like, why is there this volcano on my face? Things like that. So we try to make it a really safe space to really start to think about what does it mean to really be growing up and becoming these human people who may or may not have attractions to other people. And not having attraction is okay, and having attraction is okay as well. So, all right, I think it's time for me to pass the mic to our first content area, which is, if I'm not mistaken, Jewish Studies, Hebrew and Jewish Studies.
Hi again. Okay. Hi again, and ברוכים הבאים לכיתה ו' יהדות ועברית.
Welcome to 6th grade Jewish Studies in Hebrew.
We believe
So we would like to open with a quote tonight. Ezahu chacham, halomed mikol adam.
who is wise, one who learns from everyone. And this year we have opportunity to 2 teachers in 6th grade to teach Jewish studies and Hebrew. And we are the role model for our students to teach them how we can learn in chavruta, with chaver, with friends, together in different ways.
Togetherness is really, really our theme. Shuli and I are working together as a team to give your children the most enriching experience we can. Jewish Studies and Hebrew are together in one class this year to give us opportunities we haven't had in years past to really collaborate in ways that we haven't before, as well as collaborating with general studies in a way that we haven't before. And also, we're making sure that everyone is together, whether we are in person at school or learning from home.
Hebrew. Our goal, focusing on conversational Hebrew, we will continue with Ulpan O, and this is the year that we have opportunity to teach all different levels, and we're gonna do differentiations. Each student gonna continue from the place that finished last year. As example, if the student finished unit 9, he will continue unit 10, etc. So working as a group, as an individual, to enrich them with vocabulary, create different kind of conversations. And all this with learning through fun activities. Yes, we also gonna be creative in this time of the pandemic. So we will be creative to find different ways to still learn together. Because of this year, we integrate Jewish studies with the Hebrew. So we have the opportunity to bring different texts in Hebrew, like poem, songs, newspaper articles, different story. Like example, with this time of the year, we are learning about Chodesh Elul, the month of Elul. We learn about forgiveness. So we will have poems in Hebrew that talking about forgiveness. So yes, it's not, we're gonna mention to each student that it will be clear and easy.
As far as Jewish Studies goes, I've been teaching this curriculum for, this will be my 3rd year teaching it, and I love how into it the sixth graders get. It's amazing to see the progression through the year as students begin to really make connections between the biblical text and the world around us. Our three main buckets in Jewish studies this year are holidays, specifically Chodesh Elul, the month of Elul. We've started, yesterday we started really digging deep into that. We'll cover the Chagei Tishrei, the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Simchat Torah. We have a special focus around Hanukkah. There's a hearty sixth grade tradition of celebrating Hanukkah together, and we are so looking forward to adapting that. And also the story of Passover. We see that in our study of the book of Genesis, and the book as we complete the book of Genesis and continue the book of Exodus. Skills we focus on, understanding the simple narrative, characters' motivations, and their thoughts and their feelings and their traits. Asking questions, asking questions and thinking critically, deriving personal meaning from the text, and really focusing on the fact that we are all interpreters of the text, and encourage the kids to take a cut, which is Yiddish for a take. We really encourage the students to have an opinion on the text. And of course, connecting the biblical text to our modern world, bringing the text to life.
We also when we learn text in Jewish studies, we will learn the text from these 5 themes: leadership, identity, power, community, and memory. And we find that we can integrate this theme to general studies. So each text will be with 5 themes. I hope that we can also integrate more stories about.
And of course, we are continuing with Tefillah this year as a whole middle school. And our main goals in Tefillah this year are to build Siddur fluency, build community, and really discover that prayer, there are many different ways to pray. If you have any questions about the Jewish Studies and Hebrew curriculum, feel free to email either of us. And now we will pass it over.
We want to wish you Shana Tova.
Oh, yes.
And good luck.
Yes, Shana Tova Umetuka, a sweet and happy new year. And next we will pass it over to Ms. Porterfield for reading and writing.
Hi. Oh, I'm so excited to be joining Bernard Zell this year as the reading and writing teacher. Jonathan, you can go to the next slide. I just want to share a little bit about myself before I get into all the details of the class. So just a few, this is a smattering of things about me, but my family, we are very close, and every summer we go to the Adirondacks in upstate New York to get away, and it's one of my favorite places. It's where I love kayaking, do yoga. Yoga is a really big part of my life. I love traveling. I have a really big family there in the middle there, 4 siblings and lots of nieces and nephews. And I put up Christopher Pike's Final Friends because one thing that really inspires me as a middle school reading teacher and writing teacher is when I was in middle school, I was an avid reader, and I'd go to the library once a week, and I could never find anything to read. So I'd always go to the same section, the Christopher Pike, R.L. Stein books, actual not really good. And I'd read them, and I was always kind of like bored, but it was something because I was like wanting to inhale literature. And it inspires me now to help kids find books that are challenging, that are interesting, and like definitely tap into those like fun reads, but also give them more when they're looking for it, because I didn't really have anyone in my life that was doing that for me. You can go to the next slide. Thanks. So the structure of reading and writing workshop is probably not new to any of you. We start with mini lessons, which are going to focus on skills, strategies, craft, author's choice, using language, and we then work into, like I give the mini lesson and then we go into workshop, and workshop to me is like a lab. It's like roll up your sleeves, we're gonna get dirty, You know, writing is with focus, it's with purpose. Reading is the same. We do it as much as we can in the classroom because it's really important for me to be able to, for the students to have the time to do it, the focus time to do it, and the community time to do it, but also for me to be able to conference, because conferencing is where I'm able to differentiate. I'm able to sit with students, I'm able to recognize where they need to be challenged and where they need support. So, you know, one student might be working on developing their voice and adding motifs to their writing, whereas another student might be working on, you know, sentence structures. And I'm able to support them through that experience by the conferencing time. Conferencing is also invaluable for peers because you get to build off of each other. It's amazing how, as much as writing, especially, and reading both, are just very independent acts, it's also, you can't do it alone entirely. Like, you need to communicate and share ideas. So I believe strongly in peer conferences as well. And, you know, we have to be creative about that this year, but we're going to do it. We have been already actually sharing. And I'm taking way too long. And then we share, which is also really important. You can go on, Jonathan. I have to move faster. So writing workshop. Lucy Calkins, we work on narrative, informational, argumentative. I assess students on the process of writing. So they need to be drafting. They need to be revising. It's so important. Editing and publishing, the final publish. I teach grammar in context. I believe strongly in working, you know, overall, I have grammar goals for the students. I've already recognized quite a few that we need to work on, but, and that's what the 5 fatal errors is. I've used this in the past where it's a quick snapshot of, like, you gotta be doing these things, and if you're not, we're gonna be handing your work back to you immediately, like, you need to work on this. But then there's greater skills that we're going to be developing and working on. And sometimes it'll be student-based and sometimes it'll be, you know, class grade-based. Again, depending on the needs of the students, especially as I get to know them better. Go ahead, Jonathan. Reading workshop, there's shared reading, which is whole class, guided reading, which is like book club reading, and then independent. And reading assessments are book talks that students give on the reading that they're doing, reading responses, which is them writing about their reading, discussions that we have, which are so important, and then formative work like short questions, vocabulary, reading conferences, and independent reading logs. Go ahead. So that is the, like, nuts and bolts, right? Like, what we're doing, but I want to talk about a little bit about why we do it. So, like, why do we read? Why are we writing? Like, it's so important for developing critical thinking skills. And this quote inspires me. It's by Lin-Manuel Miranda. He wrote Hamilton. It's to engender empathy and create a world using only words is the closest thing we have to magic. And this is kind of inspiring the 6th grade year. And Jonathan, you can go on to the essential questions. Thank you. So the essential questions that we're using to guide our year and our thematic units are kind of big questions that I want students to be thinking about. I'm really committed to anti-racist curriculum, and I think a lot of these questions get at that. Sorry. So how does point of view shape a story? Who are we in our own stories? What power do words have in creating movements and causing change? What is empathy? How can we empathize with people and heroes I read about and write about? You know, how can they inspire me to write and act? What is social justice? How does reading help me gain awareness of social issues and influencing my writing choices? And then ultimately, who am I as a reader and a writer? Like, that is one question we'll be really working on all year. And then Jonathan, if you can go to the units, thank you. So the units we'll be using to direct the writing and reading workshop. We're starting with character and perspective. And so we're going to be reading short stories together. And students are also looking at point of view and their independent reading. And we're going to be writing narratives together. Then we're going to move into identity and belonging. We're going to read a shared novel, The Length of a String. And students will be writing literary analysis argument essays on that. From there, we're going to move into the civil rights unit. We're going to be talking about protest, resistance, and change. Students will be in nonfiction book clubs, and they'll also be reading nonfiction works in their independent reading. They'll be writing informational and narrative pieces in that unit. I'm actually thinking about maybe doing something sci-fi with that, just because I want to really bridge the gap from the civil rights movement from the 1950s to what we're experiencing in our world now. So I'm playing around with the idea of kind of thinking about the future in their writing as well. And connecting that, we're going to move into a poetry unit, The Power of Words. It's going to be a poetry analysis, and they're going to be writing their own poetry collections. And the writings are going to be, the work we're going to be studying is going to be the poetry that has caused movements, the poetry that has caused change. So poetry that I hope will inspire students. I really want to develop this love of writing, and to help them find what they love to write about and foster that so that they're engaged and enthusiastic about wanting to work on their own writing, right? Because like, you got to work at it. And then finally, a choir of voices. Those are social justice book clubs. And students will be writing literary analysis essays, and also they get to do a free choice at the end of the year to show us what they've learned, what they're interested in, what they want to do next. So that is, oh good. That is what the years looks like for reading and writing. And Hillary's here to introduce herself. She's been working with me, so she's going to introduce herself as well. Thank you. You're right there.
Hi, I'm Hillary Lev, and I have the pleasure of being the 5th and 6th grade specialist this year. Some of you may know me. I was in SK through 2nd grade for the past 6 years, and here I am in 5th and 6th. So I'm really excited to be part of the 6th grade team. Just to share a little bit about myself, a little bit about my work with Bridget. I'm here to help and support with reading and writing. And that Bridget and I collaborate. There's some team teaching and some team planning. I'm part of the 6th grade team meetings as well. And my work will be in a variety of different ways, but it could be various small groups, individually outside the classroom, or when I can't be inside the classroom, it will be via Google Meet or Zoom. So that's just how I'm here to help support some of the kiddos this year. Thank you. Have a great evening.
I'm gonna step over. I'm Rachel Jury, and I'm gonna be teaching everybody in 6th grade history this year. So it's really special for me to get to loop with a group of kids. And even if I didn't teach your child last year, I know them both as a parent in the world of 6th grade, but also as a person who was their teacher, a person who stood in front of them for a lot of last year. So it's pretty amazing to see the growth they've made in a whole year. So 6th grade history builds, last year's theme was individuals make choices, choices make history. And 6th grade history is all about leadership. And as it's a presidential election year, it's a great time to be talking about leadership. But we're really looking at ancient leadership. And we start the year with taking a look at ancient Greece. And then kids, they're going to be participating in the simulation. They received Greek names today. Pretty soon they'll have some Greek clothing. They live in a Greek polis, which is a city-state. Then we'll take a look at ancient Rome. And towards the middle part of the year, there'll be, you can move the slides 2 forward. Then at the middle part of the year, we'll be looking at the origins of monotheistic religion, specifically doing a deep dive on Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, taking a look at who were the leaders who influenced those religions and how to, what's the legacy of all of those religions. And we end the year with the Age of Exploration, looking at what happened when Europeans came to have connections with people who were already living in North and South America, and how did that change our world, and what was the role of Africa in those pieces. And woven throughout the year is something really cool called the Out of Eden Project. So if you're looking for an interesting website, if you want to check out Out of Eden, the journalist Paul Salopek set off to walk the path of human migration, and he left out of Ethiopia and has been walking for 7+ years. And our students will be in a walking party with kids from other places in the world. When I did it before, there were kids in Ghana and kids in Mexico and kids in Ohio, and they'll be talking about their world. And one of the first things they're going to be doing is taking a close look at their own neighborhood. So this really builds on the skill of close looking. And if you think about the skill of close looking in neighborhoods, put that in the back of your head when you hear about Joanna's class. You'll see some really nice intersectionality. So we're super excited for 6th grade, and it's great to be seeing all the kids' smiling faces, even though we can't see their face, you know, the bottom half of their faces. You can tell with their eyes when they're smiling. I'm going to turn it over to Joanna.
Hey everyone. It's still asking me to unmute, so I'm gonna move that out of the way. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm Joanna Thompson, and some of you know me already. I'm not gonna introduce myself twice because you're gonna see me again for science, but just a few things about me. I am a native Californian, but I've made my home Chicago for the past 17 years. That's me and my partner, Karenina, right there, and below us is our family. That's her brother taking the selfie, and his family, plus my sister's kids, they all came out for a holiday one year, and we had a great time. I came here from the Field Museum, where I worked on a bunch of really cool projects, which I'd love to talk to you about sometime. And I have a small business called Pixie Dust Salts. I make really delicious cooking salts for your food with local, fresh ingredients. And pertinent to this particular class is the bottom left corner, the SEED National Project. SEED stands for Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity. And I'm a nationally trained facilitator, and I've led 5 cohorts here of faculty in looking at systems of oppression, looking at race and gender and class, and sort of thinking about how our personal stories affect that. So you can go to the next slide, please. This class that we're teaching this year for the first time is called Identity, Race, and Segregation. And you know, we say a lot this year, this time right now, like we are living in unprecedented times. This is unprecedented, but really it's not unprecedented. 100 years ago, we were in a pandemic and people were wearing masks to sporting events. 100 years ago, there was incredible racial tension across all of the cities. And it was started because a Black person was killed for no reason, and their killer was not brought to justice. Police didn't do anything, and that police accountability piece was really the crux of it. We also had a segregated city. And it seems like as we ask ourselves these questions today, we're wondering, like, how do we do better? And even when we try to do better, we sort of make a mistake. Quick example, if you go to the next slide, this happened this week. The New York Times published a photo essay that compared Streeterville and Inglewood. Inglewood has a 30-year life expectancy gap. People in Inglewood live 30 years less than people in Streeterville. And the photographer, Alex Soth, was asking some important questions. His photos were glossy and gorgeous and beautiful. The only problem with the questions he was asking, if you go to the next slide, is that they're questions that a Black woman from Inglewood has been asking for 5 years. She has a project called The Folded Map. I've used it a number of times in the past couple of years in various classes. And she actually looks at 6520 North Ashland and 6520 South Ashland, and she compares these homes. And then she actually interviews the people. It's a very cool sociological art project. And so the problem there was that this white photographer from Minneapolis didn't realize that this project was already happening. And he didn't even do his homework because she's kind of all over the place. She's on WBEZ, she was at a museum at Loyola, she was on Al Jazeera, like she's on the Times. So that's like this really interesting moment. And I think that what I am hoping this class does is helps kids develop the language so that they don't find themselves in those sort of situations. So if you go to the next slide, we're gonna focus on identity. We're gonna ask ourselves, what does my identity mean to me as a 6th grader at Bernard Zell? And what might identity mean to other people? And how might I be able to understand them if I understand myself a little bit better? Next slide. We are also going to talk about race. We're gonna ask ourselves, what is race? We're gonna look at it from a biological standpoint. We're gonna ask the hard questions of what does it mean when we say something or someone or a behavior is racist? And we're gonna say, what does it mean when a system is racist? Can things be racist? And we're gonna create a space for that. Next slide. And we're gonna really look at a deep dive of segregation. We'll mostly focus in Chicago, but Chicago's a good holotype for the rest of the country. And we're gonna look at, why did segregation start? When did it start? Who and what does that segregation affect? What does that segregation cost us? How does it cost us in income loss across the city? What does it cost us in health and lives? And that we're gonna do all of this so that hopefully in 100 years, we don't have another map like we're looking at right here. Last slide, please. Along the way, I'm really gonna build on what's happening in Jewish studies and in reading, writing, and in history. There's a lot of academic skills that are gonna come into this class, everything from primary and secondary sources to argumentative writing to looking at art and poetry and music as a way to understand the past. And the most important thing I think is we're gonna practice brave conversations and developing the language it takes to have those conversations and to look at ourselves and to look at the world around us really honestly. So I'm really excited about this class. I'm going to pass it on to our next presenter.
Hello, Bernard Zell, sixth grade parents. It's wonderful to be able to speak with you tonight. I'm going to start with just saying briefly a little bit about myself. I have a family picture in the corner here. You know, it's just kind of nice to share that also with the students. I have a son who's almost the same age as the sixth grade students that I teach. And so it's always fun to bring in little anecdotes about what goes on at home. Want to tell you a little bit about the focus of sixth grade art. Overall, the overarching theme is how art often breaks the mold and can be innovative. And so what we're going to do is, normally when it's not a pandemic, you know, we have the first semester and the second semester. And I decided that even though I'm doing a rotation for about 8 weeks with your students right now, I still am going to treat it like that, where I have sort of the part 1 and the part 2. And so the part 1 is really a focus on American pioneering artists that broke out of the mold and did something innovative. And really, focusing also on minority artists and artists of color. And again, we like to talk about intersectionality because it is so important. And so what Ms. Jury has just talked about, and then Ms. Thompson, you know, we're really looking now a lot more at what have minority groups done and people of color. And so there's going to be more focus on that. And also the part 2 is more general, looking at big ideas in art and looking at innovation, but kind of taking it in a more global view, not just focusing on the United States. So down below on my slide, I just love to show images from the, you know, the parent-teacher nights, and parents just enjoying seeing the artwork and the students being able to present. So it's always a very special moment when we get to do that. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So looking at my part 1, American pioneering artists, I like to begin with a focus on Georgia O'Keeffe, who is an artist that many of us know about. And I kind of like to see her as the bridge between realism and abstraction. And we talk about how it was such a breakthrough idea that she took something that was very realistic, like focusing in on flowers, and went closer and closer into what the flowers really looked like, and ended up causing the image to look abstract because she was focusing so closely. What's nice about Georgia O'Keeffe is that it also involves a bit of biology study, you know, like looking at the internal workings of nature and then presenting it and showing its beauty and showing how things are constructed. We kind of transition from Georgia O'Keeffe, who is the bridge between realism and abstraction, and then move on to another artist, an African-American artist named Alma Thomas. I have to say, one really nice anecdote about this artist is that this was the first work of art that was brought into the White House by the Obama administration to be hung on the wall in the White House. And there's kind of a famous picture where the Obamas are hosting all sorts of people for a Passover Seder, and Alma Thomas's artwork, the circular one that's like the sun radiating out, is actually hanging on the wall. So it's kind of a nice combination of cultures and things. Alma Thomas is kind of like the next step after Georgia O'Keeffe. She went even more abstract. She focused in on things so closely that after a while it became more about shape and color. And the other thing is she was very influenced by the Harlem Renaissance, which was this incredible time after the migration from the rural South of the African American people to the big cities, especially in New York City. Became sort of a golden era of creativity back in the 1930s, the 1920s also. And Alma Thomas, being influenced by the Harlem Renaissance, by jazz music, had a very strong connection between music and art, and also nature and art. So she connects nicely with Georgia O'Keeffe, and she also connects to our next artist on the next slide. And that is Romare Bearden, who I like to say is the next step after Alma Thomas. We're going to be learning a lot about him and other artists that came from the rural South to the big city, and were very influenced by the hustle and bustle of the city. And it became like things were disjointed, things were loud, there was music, and the art just represents everything that those people were experiencing. And also bringing in the idea of collage, it becomes very postmodern. And so your children are learning about all kinds of things like that. We're also going to be looking at some Latina artists and some other African-American artists during this time. And then if we can do the next slide. Thank you. When we go over to the part 2, the second part, where we're looking more at the bigger ideas and more globally, I start the students off with thinking about themes, ideas that they want to share with other people. Art is also about visual communication. Can you communicate your message clearly? And so giving them just pieces of colorful paper, how can you communicate an idea with paper, with something that's so two-dimensional? How can you use it in a three-dimensional way to communicate a thought or an idea? And as you can see in these examples, students were able to communicate ideas such as relaxation, such as friendship, such as soaring to the future, things like even what it's like to think about a smile, what it's like to think about happiness. And could you communicate that to somebody else so they would know what you were saying? So it's actually one of the most enjoyable lessons where students try to guess what the other student was trying to communicate. And finally, on our last slide, one of the most favorite projects that our students do is looking more about design. It involves design thinking and just the idea that you can take simple materials, just random materials, even things that you could find at home, and design an innovative short sports shoe. Students at this age love shoes, especially athletic shoes, sports shoes. And when told that they have to work on a project for Nike and come up with something with more innovations than what we have today, the students just took off with some wonderful ideas. They started off with sketches and then worked together with partners. These were pictures from last year and the year before to come up with a three-dimensional form of a shoe, creating a prototype. So in other words, we're looking at how art can be innovative, how art can be expressive, and we'll go to the last slide. So I like to say that art is multisensory. It's all about looking at different media and techniques. And art also guides us in inquiry and problem solving. We do a lot of design thinking. Art is, of course, all about self-expression and reflection. It's also about communication and being able to use images with words, or sometimes images on their own, to communicate so many things. You've heard the statement, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, it really is. Art also develops empathy and multiple perspectives. We look at how different people view the world by looking at the art that they produce. Art, of course, is multicultural. It brings in aspects of many different cultures, and we like to look at traditions, art traditions from the past, and then how artists of today are incorporating those traditions in a more contemporary way. And finally, especially because this is so important to us at Bernard Zell, art can address issues in society and in our world. And again, talking about the intersectionality, you know, we're looking at what's going on today with the pandemic, with the social justice issues, you know, with the protests, and we can look at how art is giving people a voice, and it can actually possibly bring about change. I like to use a little bit of Hebrew here and say that art helps us to understand ourselves, mi ani. It helps us to understand our world, mi anachnu. It helps to build community, kihila, understand our responsibility, achrayut, which is our theme of this year. And art can help repair the world, tikkun olam. And I want you to know that your students, your children are engaged in all of that in the art program. So I'm excited to be sharing their work as they go along, and please reach out if you have any questions. I'll turn it on over to the next person.
Hey everyone, by the magic of Zoom, I have arrived in the science lab. So this is where your students have science every day. We come here and we socially distance, and this is actually the 6th grade side of the room, and this is the 5th grade side of the room. We've kind of split the amoeba-shaped table partly down the middle. So the kids have been really great about wiping off their desks every single day. So if they tell you they don't know how to wipe a table at home, I am going to tell you they are not being honest. They're doing a really great job here. So in 6th grade science, we are covering ecology. We'll do some robots this year. We'll do some earth science and models and some design and engineering. Next slide, please, Jonathan. The first part of our unit is going to be adaptation with ecology. So we'll be looking at food webs, but we'll really be focusing on how animals adapt to their environment and how that adaptation is specific to the food web that they live in, to the environment that that food web is in. And we're going to be doing a dissection on a grasshopper very much like this. It is literally about that, about that big, those grasshoppers. They are giant grasshoppers. So there'll be lots of good things to see, lots of parts to look at, and that's going to be awesome. Next slide, please. This sets us up for the meat of our ecology unit, which is looking at population ecology. So what we do in 6th grade is we've partnered with the UIC Learning Sciences Lab, and we've done this for about 5 years, and they've built a program for us that is a virtual ecosystem. We call it wall ecology. The idea is that the ecosystem's in the walls, and it's kind of the wall equivalent of being dropped onto an island, and you don't know any of the species, you don't recognize any of them, and you have to describe them, you have to name them, to go through like a naturalist phase, and then you get to experiment on them. So you can see a few of these species here. There's this one here. These guys, I didn't put them all on here, but they're very cool. And when we experiment on them, we're trying to figure out, like, how does this food web work? What eats what? And so the goal is to build a food web just like this, all right? So we do all of these things that scientists would actually do. Please go to the next slide. Now, this year it's gonna be pretty cool because normally in this classroom, we would have an ecosystem computer right over here, and we'd have one over there, and we'd have one over there, and kids would gather around these computers to look at the ecosystem, to actually watch these species moving around in animated form. We can't do that. We can't gather around anything. So the brilliant minds at UIC built us a program that we can take either way. So this right here is a map of our classroom. The green is our amoeba wall, right? Our amoeba table there. And you are looking at screenshots of kids that don't go here, but they're just placeholders for our kids walking to the different wall scopes, like walking, and they can also walk to me, the teacher. And when they get close to me, the teacher, or they get close to their friends, a chat box, they can even talk to each other. So this will work whether we're in school or if we have to go home. So we're really excited about how awesome this is gonna be. And the chat is all recorded, so even if I didn't hear an awesome conversation that students were having about the food web, I can see it later. I'm really excited about this. Next slide, please. We'll do some robots. We'll have to have some rules around them because we only have one robot for every 2 kids, but we'll probably do like days on, days off kind of a thing, but robots are gonna happen. Next slide. And then second semester is all about models, earth science, and disaster, which this is a year also for disaster. We've got more wildfires than we've ever had. We're seeing more hurricanes than ever. And so what we do is we use models to understand the earth itself, because the earth itself is crazy big and we can't really go to the center of the earth, but we can model it. Just like Wellcology is actually a model for ecosystems on a computer screen, we're gonna build our own 3-dimensional models. We'll learn about plate tectonics, and we will also do some building and design. If you go to the next slide, I will wrap it up here. Our last unit that I hope we get to is called Call the Plumber, and my favorite part about it is it actually gets your kids underneath your kitchen sink going, where does the water go after I wash it down the sink? And we start to think about what pressure is like. We start to design a plumbing system that is based on optimum design. So do you want it to have high pressure? Do you want it to have low pressure? Do you want to spend a lot of money, or you want a budget? Looking at all these constraints and making choices for the best design, the optimum design based on your goals. So that's what science is about in 6th grade. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of hands-on, and a lot of it's not going to have to change too much this year. But when we do have to change it, we will. So that is all of my slides. And so I think it's time for us to go to Q&A. So I'm just gonna walk around the science lab though and turn these lights back on. There we go.
So if anyone has any questions, you should be brave and write it in the chat box, because then we could answer it.
So we have one question about regarding addressing racism and anti-Semitism. And when in school do we cover the Holocaust? So we address anti-Semitism in 6th grade, definitely, and Jewish studies. We talk a little bit about how Pharaoh, definitely through the context of the book of Exodus, and how Pharaoh kind of used his position of power to turn his people against the Israelites, and how that is probably like the first instance of anti-Semitism. And we connected a little bit to today. But in terms of the Holocaust education, we, as a school, we celebrate or honor Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, but a lot of our core Holocaust education really comes in 8th grade, when we talk about more modern Judaism. But of course, as questions come up, 6th graders are very curious, and as long as it's appropriate to talk about, we answer questions that students may have.
I'm also going to just jump on that as well. One of the Length of a String, the book that we read together, it's an epistolary novel. So there's letters in one half of the story, like the chapters go back and forth, and one half of the story is the main character's grandma writing during the Holocaust. So there is that element that we talk about, of course, but like you said, in 8th grade, the history is covered.
I'm just going to also jump on and say that last year in 5th grade, we had a very special project where the students thought about their own childhood memories and did a work that was inspired by Marc Chagall, kind of showing memories with a visual narrative style similar to that of Chagall. And then at the same time, they learned about a young child that was part of the Kindertransport. They got to see a documentary film that was narrated by the woman as an older woman. She's still alive today. The film was very age appropriate, and she talked a lot about how her childhood memories from before the Holocaust, before she was sent on her own on the Kindertransport to Britain, that her childhood memories are what helped sustain her during the time that she was separated from her parents. And she does end up going back to Austria after the war. Sadly, it turns out her parents did end up dying in the Holocaust. But the overarching message that we focus on at that age is, that this person had resilience and that the memories helped her. We are actually continuing this project in 6th grade. It's going to be very interesting because we have a school in Israel that is working on the same project with us from last year. And because of COVID, we had to put it on hold. And normally it would have been finished in 5th grade, but we're going to try as much as we can to Zoom with the classes in Israel, with the class in Israel, and continue the project because we needed to do the joint part that was with the other school. So that, you could say, that is a little bit connected to the Holocaust, but again, in a way that's very appropriate for that age.
We had a question about how we are all feeling about how in-person class is going. So that's a zinger, I feel. I can start by saying it's been so awesome to be back in the energy of the school and with the kids. There's nothing like teaching in person, nothing. And there's also nothing like teaching in person during a pandemic. Like, I don't think I've ever been so exhausted, even my first year of teaching. There's so much new, there's so many moving parts. So yeah, I think it's definitely a both and for me. Like, whoa, and also it's so good to be back. I'll let anyone else want to answer that if you'd like to.
I'll answer because I also have another question to answer. Agreed. I feel like it's so good to be back. I was afraid I'd have to meet all the students over Zoom, so it's really nice to be here. But it is interesting to talk all day like that. But we're getting used to it and we're making it work, and it's pretty amazing, I think, that we get to be here together. And then I have a question. Are there nightly reading requirements? There are. My reading requirement is that students are reading for 30 minutes a night for 5 nights a week. So that means that they can chunk it how they want. If they have activities Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, then they can move some of their reading to the weekend. They can read for an hour on Saturday. I check their reading log every 2 weeks. So there's a lot of flexibility in there. I know that life happens. I understand it. So that's the guideline, is half an hour for 5 nights. But again, it's basically 2.5 hours for the week.
So there's also a question about how much homework 6th graders have per night, and maybe where is the best place for parents to look to find that homework. And so if you are getting the summaries on Google Classroom, that's the best place to look, or over your kid's shoulder on their Google Classroom is also the best place to look. But really the 100% best place to look is their assignment notebook. They should be writing down the assignments in every class at the end of every class. And if you're finding that they're not, reach out to the advisor. We'll find out why. Maybe for some reason that teacher, we are in a pandemic, people, and I'm telling you, the end of class comes real fast. All of a sudden I'm like, we haven't wiped tables. So like, just a gentle reminder sometimes is really great for the teachers. Like, hey, they need the time. Also, maybe it's your kid. Like, why aren't they writing their stuff down? Your advisor wants to know that. So, assignment notebook, those summaries, and then make them log into their Google Classroom and show you every single assignment that's due. Google Classroom is sort of like, takes all the feelings out of it. It's just there. It's just there. So that's pretty great. In terms of how much homework to have a night, I think we're trying not to do more than that's a tough one because we have different schedule this year. So
Ms. Thompson, can I jump in here?
Yeah, please do.
I usually tell my advisees, if you're doing more than an hour of homework a night, you're either not working efficiently or we're assigning too much homework. I also tell students that they need to be going to bed even if they're not done with their homework, because No one wants a grumpy student in the morning. So make sure that they're getting to bed, whether it's 9, 9:30, 10 o'clock, whatever. They want to be showing up fresh the next day, and we can always push the homework off or lighten the load. That's part of the advisor's job as advocate. If the student is, some of us have like perfectionist kids who want to spend 4 hours on a science assignment, and that's part of us as our advocates to say, well, okay, maybe you don't need to spend 4 hours on that assignment. Maybe it was good enough 3 hours ago. And we'll kind of work with them. We can also work with the teachers if maybe we all had a test accidentally on the same day, so we can work with that. But really, no more than an hour or so, maybe ish, depending on reading. Reading is a half hour, so hour 15, somewhere around there. And it's 8 p.m.
So if you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We would love to talk to you and answer them. We can schedule more phone calls, anything you'd like to do. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Give everyone a breakfast tomorrow before they take naps.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, parents.
Thank you.
So
Very
good to
much
see
for everything you
you.
do.
Mhm.
Thank you.
The mouse is gone.
Hi, Cohen's.